Welcome everyone, Christine here with my campaign guide for Drazhoath the Ashen in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. The way I would describe this campaign is, on one hand you have the Legendary Lord that probably has the most amount of power in a campaign from the Cast Dwarves, but also has the hardest campaign by far, especially on higher difficulty. So this is the kind of campaign where if you're a veteran player, I would highly recommend it because it's going to give you a really good time, but it's certainly going to be pretty brutal at the same time as well. Don't get me wrong, Astrogoth's situation with Grimgor isn't necessarily easy either, and I was doing that campaign, and I felt playing as Astrogoth, I kind of felt in a similar way to the way I feel when I'm on a boss in World of Warcraft on Mythic difficulty in a raid, and you're just kind of, you can do it, but it's pretty sketchy. So dealing with Grimgor is a pretty brutal situation in general. And yes, I will mention Grimgor a lot. That's the kind of thing you're going to have to deal with in the Darklands. Now, let's look at Drazhoath, his faction effects, his lord effects, his special skill line, his starting situation, and how you should play him. Faction-wide effects, he gets a minus 10% armament cost for unit capacity. So on turn 1, one of the things you can do is just go nicely very here, and the Hellforge is just increase your warrior capacity, and that way you can recruit 3 warriors on the first turn. Bearing in mind, you will obviously want to recruit hobgoblins pretty quickly as well in order to get Gordeus. So you're going to want to get the Hobgoblin Muster Camp in the Black Fortress. Now the Black Fortress itself starts as a tier 2 settlement. It does have the giant conveyor, so that's materials and armaments, but it also crucially has the prototype Mega Mortar. This gives you the Dreadquake battery ability in your province, effectively. I think it only affects the province. I haven't really fought as Drazhoath with this ability because I generally remove the structure after I deal with some of the initial enemies. It makes it pretty easy to deal with this particular army on their Grisguts over here and deal with the Darkland Orcs, but after that I kind of want to get rid of it to open up a slot over here, but you can certainly keep it on for longer to give you a very strong defensive ability over here in the Black Fortress and in this entire province. Good luck for anyone trying to assault the Howling Waste when you're Drazhoath, because you have a very powerful defensive ability. Just bear that in mind. Now, looking at Drazhoath's Lord skill and special skill line, he does get the Tyrant of the Black Tower, which gives him campaign movement range, upkeep for Cathay benefits, and the Dark Renown ability, which gives him melee attack to units within 35 meters, if the unit has Contempt. Now, Contempt is something that effectively casts Dwarves themselves, like the Infernal Guard with Fire Glaives, for instance, have over here. Interestingly enough, it's not something the Cathay units have themselves, it's something the Cast Dwarves have in their campaign, including the Lords and Heroes. Speaking about Heroes, you do start with an Infernal Castellan. He's not really great in battle, but he does give you mobility and extra income, and he does have some powerful abilities as well in battle, like Extra Pounder for quite a bit of explosive damage over here, and then Restock to replenish the ammunition of your units, especially your artillery, but also your pretty powerful gunpowder units. You do start with 1 unit of Infernal Guard, 1 unit of Cast Dwarf Blunderbuss, and 1 unit of Cathay Fireborn. You also start with some worthless laborers that you should get rid of as quickly as possible. It's not like laborers are bad, there's just much better units to use in a Cast Dwarf campaign. Now, looking at the special skill line, he gets Cinder Breath as a mount. It's probably the best mount for a Cast Dwarf, so it's a Bale Taurus. It's the best Bale Taurus that you can get as a Cast Dwarf. Then you get research, construction time, construction cost. The research is kind of worthless because the way the Cast Dwarf research tree works, a lot of things are done pretty quickly, and they also cost technology. So for instance over here, let's say I wanted to get over all the way down here to the Beast of Tsar, it would take me 22 turns, and that's with just 105% research rate. But keep in mind, some of these things are going to be gated by materials, and that kind of research will always be instantly done. And to also be quite honest, going down this particular path is not necessarily worth it. So research rate is not really important for the Cast Dwarves. Obviously, it can be beneficial if you're to get to 200%, but 10% not really going to do all that much. You get We Are Legion. This is a very significant benefit because it reduces the armament cost for increasing capacity of Infernal Guard and Infernal Ironsworn, which are some of the best infantry units you have. Reduces the upkeep and gives you a bonus versus infantry when in Drazhoath's own army. So you can have a really elite army of Chaos Dwarves with Drazhoath himself. Then he gets a 10% income from cities and a 10% raw material output. So he'll have more armaments because of the faction-wide effect. And then with his special skill line, he'll have a lot more raw materials than the other legendary lords. Well, from a practical perspective, Zaytan may end up with more raw materials because he just gets so much more labor that he can afford to get more higher tier material structures. But just increasing at 10% raw material output is very significant. Then you get an armament cost reduction for increasing capacity of Cathay units, weapon strength, and physical resistance. So his army really works well with the combination of Cathay and Infernal Guard, more or less. Or Infernal units in general. Then you get the Ashen, which gives you HP, barrier, and wound recovery time. Wound recovery not particularly important if you're not going to lose a battle with him. But the barrier certainly makes him far more durable on the battlefield, and as do the HP. And combine that with Cinder Breath, this guy's an absolute monster, even if you don't spend any points in his melee skill line. Which you may not want to have because he has a pretty powerful magic benefit in terms of Winds of Magic cost reduction for Flames of Azgorh. So you get the Lore of Hashut. That means you get something like Killing Fire, which does damage to units nearby if you're casting a spell. You also, and the Flames of Azgorh themselves are one of the best spells currently in the game, I think, from the Lore of Hashut, or just in general with magic. The Flames of Azgorh are absolutely ridiculous as a spell. But that's his special skill line. Then he gets a pretty sweet item set bonus, which gives you melee attack for Embedded Infernal Castellan heroes faction-wide, so you can make them more useful in melee. They're kind of going to suck in range, by the way. And also reducing the enemy leadership for enemy armies in region. This is pretty significant because reducing leadership makes a lot of battles much, much easier to deal with. Then you get control in the local province, the Graven Scepter and melee attack. The Graven Scepter is an incredibly great item because it gives you those magical attacks, so you're going to be chewing for armor, and you're going to get a lot of melee attack, armor piercing, and base weapon damage. Then you get the Demon Spite Crucible, which gives you spell mastery up to 20% for each kill you make in battle. So throw Drazhoath in a battle, kill some units, and then start chucking out those spells. Targeting range for Lore of Hashut spells, leadership for his army, and spell resistance. Then you get the Hellshard Amulet, which gives him melee damage reflection and damage resistance, as well as Winds of Magic and Ward Save for his entire army. He is a pretty significant beast in combat. His army is strong, his items are strong, his faction benefits are good, his skill line is good. So Drazhoath has a lot of power here between his starting position, his starting army, his faction effects. He starts at war, however, with pretty much everyone. This is the problem in Drazhoath's campaign. Everyone near you pretty much hates you one way or another. So the Darkland Orcs over here, they obviously are your initial faction that you're meant to deal with. And it's fairly easy to deal with them and just wipe down. They only have this army. There's 2 good landmarks over here, by the way, in the Black Fortress itself, if we're looking at tier 4 for Infernal Castellan, and upkeep reduction for all Infernal Guard units. And then in the Sentinels at tier 3, you'll also get 50% income from trade tariffs and maximum cargo capacity. That means a lot of money from trade and trade caravans. But the problem is every other faction hates you. These guys over here in the Tower of Gorgoth, I think I can just show it over here by just auto-resolving this particular battle. So just auto-resolve that, even if I lose a lot of units right here, right? But the rogue, if you will, Gazdor faction. Build an outpost. That's great. Alright, so build an outpost over there. And we can see with these guys that you have a minus 34 diplomatic relations with them from the start. They don't like you. There's the default aversion from between Chaos Dwarves, and also they don't like your treaties with the Servants of the Conclave. So they're a completely rogue faction. You should wipe them out, by the way. As for Tretch Craventail over here, Skaven only have a minus 25 aversion against Chaos Dwarves, but Tretch, for whatever reason, actually likes the Darkland Orcs, so you wiping them out is really going to hurt your diplomatic relations. It's very easy to get to a minus 100 diplomatic relations with Tretch Craventail, so he's going to declare war on you. If you expect Tretch to not declare war on you, enjoy that nice fantasy scenario that you're going to engage in. And then Emmerich also despises you. He has a minus 100 aversion against you. And then the ogres over here to the south, They start with -20 because of the version they have, and they're also going to declare war on you, especially on higher difficulties. Then you get into the discussion about Gorst and the discussion about Greases. Greases doesn't hate you too much beyond the -20 version, but he certainly may take advantage of your situation to declare war on you. But he has other issues in his campaign between Gorst and walking behemoth over green behemoth over here to the north. That's always going to be an issue. Fun fact, by the way, for whatever reason over here to the east, the western provinces actually, like Xiaoming, for whatever unknowable reason, actually likes Gorst. I think it's because Gorst wipes out these Skaven early on, and Xiaoming hates the Skaven, so that builds good relations between Gorst and Xiaoming. So if you wipe out Gorst, guess who's gonna come barreling down from the east? And Cathay is not necessarily a weak faction to deal with in a campaign. They can get a lot of powerful armies pretty damn quickly because they have a good economy. They have good units early on, like Jade Warriors with their armor, Jade Warrior crossbowmen is very significant. Like, playing against Cathay is kind of like playing against the Dwarves, with many of the negatives that the Dwarves suffer in their campaigns kind of removed. They still have bad casualty replenishment, but the AI doesn't care about that. I mean, consider the Dwarves, the regular Dwarves. They're kind of crap as a race by default, but on higher difficulties, they get a lot of benefits in growth, control, economy, casualty replenishment, that makes them far stronger. Take that, make it a better race with a better economy, better situation on their campaign map, better units flat out from very early on in their campaign, and that's what you get to Cathay. So yeah, it's kind of like fighting the super duper powerful Dwarves when you're fighting against Cathay. And Xiaoming is going to hate you for another reason as well. See, the Black Fortress is a major pit stop for a lot of Cathayan caravans. So the vast majority of times, a Cathayan caravan will park itself just right outside the Black Fortress from virtually every major Cathayan faction, with the exception of Miao Yang. And maybe the Celestial Loyalists as well, and the Imperial Wardens. But all the factions that you see over here in the Riverlands, the Jade Custodians, the Burning Nomads, and the River Lords, they will all have caravans coming your way. So you can easily wipe them out to gain a significant amount of cash from that. And more crucially, labor, because labor is money. Like a Cathayan caravan might have 500 labor by default, and that's not including the post-battle options that you can go for. So you can earn a lot of money for that. But you're also pretty close enough to Cathay that Cathay might just start barreling towards you at full strength. And there's nothing worse in your campaign when you start seeing 4 stacks of Cathayan troops marching on your territory. That's one problem. You can obviously take advantage of that. This is the crucial aspect of Drazhoath's campaign. He has a lot of power, but he's also hated by everyone. My suggestion would probably be to give pick barter to Gorst, or wipe a Gorst out and sell all of this territory to Greases, and try and make an alliance with Greases, because I think you can probably get along better with Greases than with Gorst, and you can certainly wipe the floor with Gorst. But that's going to take some time, and you might not have the luxury of sending an army east, because you're going to end up in a war with Tretch. Now, the thing to know about dealing with Skaven is this. They always have a lot of armies. They'll always build any faction of the Skaven, even the minor ones on Legendary, they're going to build like 3-4 armies. It's mainly going to be made up of their initial army, Skaven slaves, and some clan rats. So you can defeat 4 armies of Skaven in a single battle, but you'll still be fighting 4 armies. I've played the campaign as Drazhoath in Realms of Chaos, well, played to a certain extent, and it was pretty insane when I encountered the minor Skaven faction that threw 3 full stacks against me by, what was it, turn 10 or something like that. Pretty ridiculous, but that's the kind of situation you can expect to Tretch. Now, Skaven can also ambush you, especially Tretch, when he declares war on you. My advice is, if you're moving against Skaven, you're either certain they're not close to you, or you're moving in a camp stand so that it's difficult for them to ambush you. Because if the Skaven jump you when you're in force march, you might have a lot of power, Drazhoath, but even he can only take so much in his campaign. Then to the south, you have Emmerich. Here's the thing about Emmerich. Emmerich should be your top priority to annihilate early on in your campaign, higher than Tretch. Tretch starts very powerful, but Emmerich becomes far more powerful if you let him. If Emmerich gets on a mount, if he gets the Armor of Calador, if he gets his special skill line, it's kind of GG if you're fighting him. I mean, you can still defeat him, but damn, this guy takes damage. He was resistant to fire by quite a significant amount. Guess what many of your range units have, or a lot of your units have? Flaming attacks. So him being resistant to fire makes him an absolute nightmare to deal with as the Chaos Dwarves, especially if you let him grow strong. So my advice would be, you take the Sentinels, you take the Darkhold, you start recruiting on turn 2 even, because it's going to take you some time. You get the second army, either on turn 2 or turn 3, or when you're moving in the Darkhold, and you start recruiting units, and then you march full force against Emmerich before he gets to like rank 10. You can defeat him quickly. Bear in mind, of course, this is going to be making you vulnerable against Stretch, but Emmerich is your top priority target in the campaign. If you defeat Emmerich in this situation, don't worry too much about Karak Azul. They've got other issues to deal with between Karak 8 Peaks, Clan Vermin, and of course Queek Headtaker. By the way, I would note that Queek is probably the one faction you actually want to ally if you're playing as Drazhoath. You can do so, especially if you send an army to take, I don't know, the Sun Pit from Karak Azul and sell it to Queek, because Queek is always going to take these 2 provinces, Blightwater and Eastern Badlands. So if you march over here, you can sell this territory to Queek and not have to deal with everything else. Everything else, including Warzag, who might decide to barrel east against you. I've noticed that he can do that. Usually, before 3.0, who just march on Barak Vard and suicide himself against Karazakarak while Malagor and Queek would wipe him out. But I've seen him actually march east. It was pretty annoying when he showed up with an entire damn stack in my territory in the Plain of Bones, while my army was dealing with other issues in this campaign. But what are those other issues? Well, you do have the faction over here in the Wolflands of the Chaos Dwarves. They're not really a substantial threat. The Chaos Dwarves, when controlled by the AI, yeah, they can be pretty powerful in the late game, but early on, they're pretty easy to actually deal with because they can't recruit a lot of their good units, and they also tend to recruit a lot of laborers, which you can easily deal with. Like, laborers aren't bad units, but they're bad units in the hands of the AI. Like, they're the equivalent of Skaven slaves, more or less. Actually, the Chaos Dwarves early game kind of act like Skaven. Actually, they act like Skaven in a lot of ways in the campaign when controlled by the AI. They tend to recruit a lot of crap units early on, but then if you let them get going, they'll recruit a lot of substantial units, and they'll recruit a lot of troops in general. So you kind of want to wipe these guys out, but here's the problem. Gorst is an issue. Gorst might declare war on you. You also have to find time to balance it out with dealing with the Scalded Delta and then march on Gorst. You want to eliminate Gorst, and then you want to give this territory to Greases. This will protect you against Kugaf, or you could, if you want to do that, sell the territory to Kugaf. I don't know why you would. Kugaf is one of the worst legendary lords in the game, especially in the hands of the AI. So it's probably best to sell all this territory to Greases and get a military alliance with him. Just bear in mind there are potentially some complications with that. The complication might be that, like, Zaytan might come down here and declare war on Greases, or Greases declares war on Zaytan, something along those lines. Or maybe Astrogoth decides to pick a fight. That could happen, but I would say a military alliance with Greases is in your best interest. I've made the mistake of allying Gorst. Don't do so. See, Greases on Legendary very hard will win against Gorst. He won't win easily, but he will win. And if he does that, you really don't want to deal with Greases. Greases is a pathetic legendary lord to play, but in the hands of the AI, when he deals with his opponents, he's a major thorn in your backside. Something I've learned from Realms of Chaos that actually now translates in Immortal Empires if you're starting over here and you have the possibility of dealing with Gorst. Take out Gorst, completely take him out. Brings the Hunted Forest, by the way, because it's not worth holding a single province with high vampiric corruption. Give parts of this province or this entire province to Greases, and yeah, you'll end up in a war with Cathay, by the way, but Cathay will have to go through Greases. You kind of want Greases to protect your eastern flank, because you're going to have other issues in this campaign. Your campaign objectives are to defeat the Dwarves, and also defeat Grimgor. That ain't an easy affair. Like, your short campaign victory conditions, deal with Tretch, deal with Emmerich, as you should. And long campaign, deal with Ungrim, deal with Forgrim, and deal with Grimgor. Out of those three, Grimgor is the most substantial threat, by far. See, what Grimgor will do in a lot of campaigns is he might end up at war with Zaytan and Kolek. That's the best case scenario. More often than not, however, when I'm playing a legendary lord as the Chaos Dwarves, he'll declare war on me. And there's nothing worse than expanding across, say, like all the way to the Gates of Zar, and then Grimgor starts barreling down from the mountains above with 3 damn stacks with Waz attached to them. Grimgor is coming for you, and he wants to kill you. He can kill you. There's very few threats in many campaigns that generally are as terrifying as Grimgor, nerve-inducing as Grimgor. When he shows up with 3 stacks, even if they're just bad units, you know you're in for a hell of a time. And the worst part about it is, oh, you defeated those stacks, congrats. And 5 turns after that, he'll bring 3 more, or 4 more, or 5, 6. That is the insanity of Grimgor. If he only controls his initial province. If this guy starts conquering significant territories in a mountain more, if he gets 3, 4 provinces, which he absolutely can, you're dealing with an endgame crisis from turn 1. And you need to deal with it. I would probably say that you should take the Gates of Zar, the Wolflands, and then just march directly into the Bone Road, then directly in Gash Kadrak, take out Grimgor. You have the army to defeat him one-on-one, and the kind of strategy you want to use against Grimgor is a similar strategy to the one you should use against Skaven. See, Skaven have a lot of armies. The key to beating Skaven is moving in camp stance, but also isolate and divide their forces. The AI is kind of bad at massing its armies together against you, so they'll spread them around. So divide and conquer, defeat and detail, if you will, against those armies. That's how you beat Grimgor. Now, I'm making that sound a lot easier than it is. Grimgor can eat you alive in a 1v1 duel in a battle, so you kind of want to give him a distraction on the battlefield. Send flying units after his artillery, or send Drazhoath after his artillery, because he does start with a unit of artillery. Send some fast movers. You should try and recruit some fast movers, like wolf riders with spears, for instance, can be really good fast movers. They'll run in circles around Grimgor's army. And just try not to have a situation where you're engaging Grimgor's main front line when he's there. Like, try and distract him. If he is coming for your front line, turn every ranged unit against him, and also all your heroes against him, and Lord against him. You may not kill him, or try and tar pit him with Chaos Dwarf Warriors. He has a lot of armor piercing though, so maybe it would be a better idea with Sneaky Gets. But either way, distract him. Don't try and kill him. You won't kill him easily. Your ranged units might be firing at full force. You might have an entire stack of Infernal Guard with Fireglaves. He will still survive a significant amount, especially once he gets in melee. It's kind of GG. So you want to kill Grimgor pretty quickly, or distract him in a fight. Killing him quickly is tricky. Distracting him can go either way, but the key to defeating him in an individual battle, you always gotta remember, he's gonna have 40 units. Most of his units are bad. You can also you can also abuse the Wa army. See, the Wa army has a leader. It's in the first unit, so in the case of Grimgor, it's likely going to be a Black Orc unit. What you want to do is not necessarily wipe out that unit, is you go in a battle and you deliberately target that unit. There's a particular model in that unit, like a captain unit, basically. If you kill that captain unit, then withdraw from the battlefield, the entire Wa army is going to disappear. So that can make your fight easier. Like, go once, just target that, kill that very quickly, maybe do some damage with spells, get out, come back, kill Grimgor. That's the strategy I'd use. It is a bit of a cheese. Sure, you're abusing something that shouldn't really happen with the War Army. I don't think it should disappear just because one model in a particular unit is killed. But that is the way Creative Assembly has done that. And once you deal with Grimgor, you should have a territory over here from the Howling Waste, the Plain of the Bones, the Desolation of Azgorh, all that. At that point, try and solidify your eastern flank, but you shouldn't go in Cathay. It's always beneficial to leave Cathay on its own, because those caravans are still going to be heading your way, and you can take a huge advantage of them. Instead, at this point, I would start conquering Forgrim and Ungrim, and that's effectively your campaign. It sounds a lot simpler than it actually is. I emphasize, this is not an easy ride. Just dealing with Tretch and Imric alone from the start of your campaign is brutal. Dealing with Gorst as well, and even these ogres, is no mean feat. And the Chaos Dwarves are the kind of race that starts out weaker, and their economy in particular early on is vulnerable. Like, for instance, you're taking over this province, you're getting a settlement over here to increase material production, raw material production, right? Well, if anyone takes the Sentinels, for instance, your economy goes kaput pretty damn quickly, because you end up in a situation like, let's say you build an outpost here, then you build your factory here. Well, guess what? If the Sentinels falls, then the factory over here in the Darkhold will stop working the moment you cease having raw materials, and that means your economy and armament production will cease working. In particular, factories produce gold, but they need raw materials to function. So if raw materials are not coming in, gold isn't coming in. If gold isn't coming in, you're going bankrupt. So that's kind of the thing about the Castle Dwarves. They are very significant once you get a powerful empire, but early on they are vulnerable. That's, by the way, the key to defeating them. Strike hard, strike aggressively, disrupt their economy, because you can bankrupt the legendary lords of the Castle Dwarf factions. Taking their towers is not easily. Absolutely, certainly not against Drazhoath with that damn artillery piece. But you don't necessarily need to take their towers to finish them on the campaign map, to make sure that they're recruiting fewer armies, and the armies they recruit are of far lower quality. Anyway, that's all there is to say. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.